Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. Best player I've ever seen in your life, huh?
Best player I've ever witnessed play this game, man. And Rich, Tom Brady is the GOAT. That he is the greatest of all time. And those are two different things for me. Just because of the amount of championships and longevity, Patrick is the best player I've ever seen in my life. And the last 2 years have completely solidified that. Certainly this Super Bowl run, man. It's an awesome. I get asked like, "Oh, you get to call the Super Bowl," and part of me is like, "Oh, I don't want to like downplay it," but I'm like, "Yeah, it's the international feed, And then I'd had to check myself and be like, "No, dude, it's the Super Bowl." At some point, you're gonna lie in your deathbed and be like, "Dude, you called Patrick Mahomes' Super Bowls," and so it was it's been cool to just witness, man. I'm such a fan of the guy.
And so what do you think makes him that special?
Rich, I've always said that he was born with this very unique ability. There is a God-given talent there. Obviously the athleticism and the throws or whatnot. I don't know if this is an actual fact. It's an assumption by me. If so, I think the best thing that his parents ever did for him was not get him private quarterback training. They never took the special away. They never took the unique away, the raw away. And that's the stuff that has allowed him to play at such a, incredible level early on in his career in some of those plays. And then, I think when he got into the league and sat for that year and learned under Alex and Andy Reid and just watched and visualized, and then he got that immediate taste of success. I think that sparked something inside of him that he probably did not even know of how great he could be, how great this journey could become. And then I think the reality is everything is slow for him. The competitive greatness makes everything slow around him. And, he's just a joy to get to watch.
And the whole country, the whole world got to see it, obviously, through your feed as well.
Yeah.
So, the only question you can have by watching this is how many more, right? I mean, is that fair to even say right now? How many more to go for him?
Of course, it's. I don't know, like fair. We have no other reason to think otherwise. We don't like. What else should we? Other than, we have to, and this, like we have to appreciate it in the moment. We have to appreciate this young man and the organization, the team. But yeah, naturally, we're going to start to ask ourselves, like, can he really chase down what's impossible to chase down? And if he continues to stay motivated the way that it sounds and focused on that long-term goal, I'm not doubting him. One of the reasons why I took them to win the game was like I've picked against them twice in my life and I was wrong both. And so, I think if he stays focused on that, and Brett Veach and Andy Reid, Brett Veach, their general manager, Rich, they've drafted since 2019, which is that year they won their first Super Bowl, or his first Super Bowl. I think they've drafted something like 6 or 7 starters on defense. 3 other guys that are like relatively important parts of their defense. They play super important minutes. So we're talking about an organization that's got a pretty good feel for how to build roster post quarterback got paid. And so, yeah, I don't put 7 past him. I think he gets to 5. That's kind of the number I've been set on, but I think he can get to 7 for sure.
Yeah, because at some point, like, let's just say he plays as long as Brady, or at least another 12 years, right? The Brady-Belichick 2001 to 2019, that's 18 years. That would be 12 more years for him. At some point, Reed, we assume, would step away, and Kelsey wouldn't be there. He'd have to find his Gronk, right? He'd have to find, or I guess he's playing with his Gronk now. He'd have to find something else. And so, that's obviously down the road. But if I'm Brett Veach, I say, screw it. Whatever you got to do to win it next year, because you could take yourselves in this franchise and just put it up one more level by saying we're the only ones to go back to back to back. We're the only ones to do it. And, that would mean, I guess, paying Jones and paying Snead and figuring out how to keep that Rubik's Cube working. But that's what I would do. Dan, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chris is a paramount part of that. I mean, Chris Jones, again, I don't want to speak in hyperbole, Rich. I don't know how many, like I keep talking about this organization, big game. Big game Chris Jones is different. We've seen a lot of great defensive linemen, come through the NFL, certainly over the past 2-3 decades. I've only been a part of it for the past 2 decades or so. I'm trying to rack my brain around a better big game interior defense, Aaron Donald, but like Chris has been in more. Just every big game, he changes it, man. The pendulum swings in favor of Kansas City because Chris Jones is in it. And so I think keeping him is a big part of it. L'Jarius Sneed, you can make the case, is the best man-to-man cover corner in football. He's certainly one of the top 3 or 4, one of the best tacklers as well. They're going to have to figure out what to do at left tackle, maybe add a perimeter player, but there's not many holes. That's the reality.
Dan Orlovsky here on the Rich Eisen Show. Your assessment of Brock Purdy's play is what?
I thought it was fantastic. Lewis and I are calling the game, Rich, and Chris, we're having these conversations throughout the game, and Kansas City's offense struggled for, 20 minutes of that football game, and San Francisco's didn't. And we were having this conversation going, this kid doesn't look scared at all. He doesn't look like he's unfazed at all. I mean, he was throwing crossing routes versus tight man coverage or, into some unique zones, and he was dotting it, man. Like he was ripping it. And so, I thought he was sensational. To go against that defense, there hasn't been a lot of quarterbacks this year that played well against Kansas City's defense. Josh Allen played well against them about a month ago. Maybe one or two other quarterbacks. This defense is one of the best in football. And so, to play a game where he avoided 4 or 5 sacks on his own, he didn't give the football away. He obviously has the touchdown pass. He leads them back from the deficit. I thought he was fantastic. There was one play that I thought he made a missed read. It's ended up in incompletion. He has Deebo Samuel on an underneath route and he throws a deep corner to the left. But other than that, man, I thought he played big time ball. And whatever you thought about Brock Purdy going into that game, if you don't come out of that game thinking more positively about him, then we look at football differently, and we'll probably never get on the same page quarterback play-wise.
I'm with you, man. I mean, it's not just tight man coverage. It was, to use a Stuart Scott phrase, like spandex tight coverage. I mean, McDuffie, too. I mean, that play that he made in the end zone early on in the game when he used his offhand to bat down a pass on Samuel in the end zone. I mean, unbelievable.
When he cut that ball loose, I'm sorry to cut you off, but when he cut that ball loose, when I saw Brock climb the pocket and start to launch, I was like, touchdown. When what happened was, you should have a DB come on and talk about it, man, because it's so rare. You saw right when Brock cuts the ball loose, you could feel Deebo start to burst a little bit, and McDuffie peeks back for the ball. We watch defensive backs all the time. They panic, they run through the guy, there's PI. He looked back in the way that he just instinctually knew ball is on its way. And so he could track it, still stay in phase and bat it away. It was because that happened at the end zone that our booth was right above. And I just, when it felt slow in real time, just watching it unfold, and it was artwork by McDuffie. He was the second best player on the field for Kansas City's defense outside of Chris.
Well, I mean, and then Chanel, right? He's the one who knocked the ball loose from McCaffrey in what appeared to be a surefire opening drive point-scoring effort, right? And then he also blocked the extra point that led to the possibility of overtime, which we then did see. I mean, the defense was out of its mind. It just was out of its mind, and that's what we were talking about when we were in Germany together about this team, and that's what we were talking about all month long leading up to this season ender, Dan.
And part of it is Steve Spagnuolo. I just talked about, Kelsey's the best big game tight end in the history of the NFL. Patrick's becoming one of the best big game quarterbacks. Just talked about Chris Jones feeling like one of the best big game defensive tackles in a while. Spags, their defense coordinator, man, he's one of the best defensive coordinators. And, you take Chanel, I remember calling some of his games at Wisconsin and just being like, this kid's really, really, really good. And then doesn't maybe get on the field as much because he's only playing in 3 linebacker sets, partly because Gay and Bolton are such good players. And then, he gets onto the scene in the Super Bowl and it's fantastic. And that defense, man, that's what during the week, Rich, it was always, I always get in, like, I love trying to find out how games are going to go. I love trying to figure out what teams are going to try to do. And so when you look at San Francisco's offense, which, is my favorite offense to dissect in the league, the run, the pass, the formations, the motions, the matchups, and you're sitting there and constantly I was like, what are they going to do with McCaffrey? Like, what are they going to do with McCaffrey? And if it was any other defense in the league, I would have picked San Francisco. Any other defense in the league, I would have taken San Francisco to win that game, even with Patrick. But just knowing how versatile that defense is on first and second down, how violent they want to play at the line of scrimmage, how unique in coverage and fronts and rushes they can get on second and third down. They, like one of the things that showed, and we talked about this on NFL Live yesterday, Rich, was if you go back and watch when McCaffrey got out of the backfield for most of his routes, not all of them, the linebackers and the cover people for Kansas City met him behind the line. They never allowed him to get to them. They always brought the party to him. And it's a little bit of a dice roll because if you get whooped, you get whooped. But I thought that was brilliant by Spags. And just, like their third down stuff, man. Like I love, again, the nerd stuff, the third down stuff where they would line up in 3-man fronts and they would play different coverages and bring different pressures to attack different people. Like it was everything that football, when it comes to the advantage of coaching and the X's and O's of it, it's everything that it should fall under.
Dan Orlovsky of ESPN here on the Rich Eisen Show. And so to me, where San Francisco may have lost it, for the lack of a better phrase, was when you pick off Mahomes to start the second half, you got to turn that into points. You can't just spin your wheels. You gotta, when you're up and the defending champs are spinning their wheels a little bit, you got to move the ball. So what did you see reviewing it back or in real time about their play calling there that you might want to point out?
Yeah, some people didn't like it. I thought it was, on par with how the game had been going. So going back to the way Brock Purdy was playing, one of the things that I was interested in the game was everyone was saying, well, they have to settle Brock Purdy down early on, and totally agree, all that. And so people were like, we got to run the ball. And I'm like, yes, but Kansas City is going to make the adamant and committed effort to not let you run the ball. So if you run the ball on first down because you want to settle the quarterback in and you get stymied or stuffed, then you're in 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, you're playing into Kansas City's hands. Okay, so I thought Kyle came out really aggressive throwing the football early on in that first half, and it played for their favor, and they moved the ball readily up and down the field. They had 125 yards in the first quarter and whatnot, completely outplaying Kansas City. And, I thought Brock threw the ball really well. So they get that turnover. I think they go pass. Now what happens is that first down pass is a bootleg, I believe. And Chanel sprints through like this is, so they bring motion from one side, Rich. And again, coaching matters. Chanel times the motion. Right when the motion goes, he triggers on a blitz because he knows he's, that's being well coached. When they bring that jet motion per where the clock is, more than likely that ball's getting snapped right when that motion comes behind the quarterback. So that triggers Chanel. He comes unblocked. Brock Purdy, I believe, has to throw the football away. Now we're in second long, great advantage defense. And so they were able to do that and get off the field. And to your point, like that was a huge moment in the game of momentum crunched by that Kansas City defense.
What's your 2 cents on Shanahan's decision to keep the ball to start overtime?
Yeah, I thought it was, crazy in the moment, and I still feel that way. I think the world of Kyle. He's one of the best coaches I've ever been around. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. I feel awful the fact that he's lost 3 heartbreaking Super Bowls to the greatest quarterback ever and the greatest quarterback ever. Okay, so, so I feel terrible for him in that regard. I still think he's one of the best. I've heard a lot of people say stuff of, well, we wanted, like Kyle said, we wanted to make sure that we got the ball first on that third possession. We wanted the ball in the third possession. Completely understand that. People said, well, the defense was gassed. They needed a break. Completely understand that. It's Patrick Mahomes. Really, any other quarterback outside of him, I can probably sit here and have the conversation to justify what they did. It's Patrick Mahomes. One thing you never want to do is give the best player on the planet a do or die situation, one extra shot. That's what they did. When you take the ball first, you give them an extra down. They know they have to get what is necessary or they go home. And that's why I sit here and I say, you can give me all the analytics and what I feel the same way I did about Dan Campbell and the field goals. Who we are and who we're playing against matters. How that game is going matters. Patrick had just gone right down the field at the end of regulation, Rich. And the only reason that they kicked the field goal was his time, not because they got to 4th and goal.
Yeah.
So you just watched him go down the field, and to think, well, he was hot at that moment. So, I still think because of who you're playing against, that has to trump all, what the numbers or the analytics or the philosophical thoughts of that are.
I don't know. I mean, because I've been going back and forth on this as well. I didn't think much of it at the time either, because we've had a bunch of coaches on talking about this subject matter more than this year. It was last year when they made the change. John Harbaugh said essentially his first thought would be to keep the ball first, because if there's no blood, get the ball first in a sudden death situation. But don't you think that if they had given the ball to Mahomes first and he had just marched down the field and he scored the inevitable touchdown, let's just say that, even without that extra 4th down situation that you just rightfully pointed out, and then the Niners have to go for it on 4th down instead of kicking a 50-yard field goal because they have to go for it on 4th down and don't make it, don't you think Shanahan would be roasted right now about, wow, why'd you give the ball to the best guy on the planet after he just damn near scored on you? No?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't have, because Rich, the philosophy is once you take the ball first, you give final control of the game away. And here's what I do know. The Kansas City Chiefs had 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 somewhere in the third quarter, backed up in their own area. And they ran with Pacheco and he got stumped. And I was like, I wonder if Andy Reid will go with this. They had not done anything on offense for the most of the day. And I was like, just to try to create some energy, they punt the ball away. So they had shown us, like, hey, if we do get to that 4th and 1 in somewhat of our area, now they may not have, but they did it earlier in the game. And I watched Kyle not too far before that go for it on 4th down, and Purdy throws the out route to George Kittle. I just think I would have never roasted Kyle if I would have 100% said, you give the ball to the other team first, you then keep control. Like we it's hard to quantify, Rich, urgency. Like it's hard to put what value of urgency is on it. There's a reason why some guys play better when they have no other choice. I remember saying this about Matthew Stafford. Matthew's one of the best late game quarterbacks in the last 20 years, 2-minute drives all day. And I asked why. I say, because he has no other choice but to. And Patrick is in that world. Why does he play best? Because he has no other choice but to do that. Now, we don't know if that's Brock Purdy, but we don't know if that's Kittle or Debo or McCaffrey. And so I just would have wanted the pen last. And especially versus Patrick Mahomes, I would want the pen last.
Last one for you, Dan. Now that we're heading to the Combine in a couple of weeks, a lot of conversation around Caleb Williams, clearly. Our colleague and a predecessor of yours talking football on ESPN, Merrill Hodge, very vocal, and he's been, vocal in the past when he was on ESPN, being pretty accurate about assessing quarterbacks. He called Caleb Williams, quote unquote, not special. So I'll give you the floor on that and what you think the Bears should do, and if the Commanders should offer a godfather.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe that right now I would take a quarterback at 1 if I was the Bears. Now, does my mind change? I haven't studied these guys, Rich. I have a little snippet of them. I'll take you back a couple years ago. I remember watching tape and video of Caleb. Immediately, I thought, yep, that's what it looks like. Just throwing the football. This was in high school. He had not even committed to Oklahoma. It was from the QB Collective stuff, and I said, that's what it looks like. That's one of those guys. I have a ton of respect for Merrill. I don't know him. He obviously has a track record of hitting on the Johnny Manziel stuff and whatnot. There's a lot of conversation around Caleb. I think Caleb is uniquely and physically very talented. You don't throw the ball the way he does, whether standing still or on the move and say that's not special. That is a special quality and trait. There's going to be a lot of conversation about not winning. There's going to be a lot of conversation about some of the off the field stuff when it came to some of their losses this year and whatnot. I probably would have been pretty emotional as well. I know this. When you're going to draft a quarterback in the league right now, if you can't beat teams 3 ways, and if you don't have uncoachable traits, it's hard to go win. It's harder than ever to go win a Super Bowl. And so I don't think he's locked in at the number 1. I think Drake May from North Carolina is going to make some noise in regards to that. I want to watch tape before I make a definitive opinion on he's not special or not. But I know his talent, that is special.
And to your point about you need to have a quarterback who's got that special it factor, uncoachable traits, as you said. Before the show, we were sitting there going, what's the big offseason move? What's the big move the 49ers need to have to get over the hump? And I said, an AFC team to knock off the Chiefs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right? That's the question.
At this point in time, that's about it.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like everyone, I was in the drive, going on the drive yesterday. I forget who. Oh, you know what? I saw a buddy of mine at the airport leaving Vegas, and immediately it was one of those like feel terrible for Kyle. And I was like, it's 5 plays. I mean, if we think about it, Kyle Shanahan is 5 plays away from being in the Hall of Fame, one of the best coaches, one of the best 15 coaches ever. And now I was walking through the airport leaving, and someone called him Jerry Sloan, as I'm leaving, and I'm just like all-time great coach that I guess didn't win or something like that. So he'll get there. I firmly believe he'll get there, but San Francisco doesn't have many holes as well, man.
I know. Dan, you're the best. Great season. As always, I'll see you in Indianapolis.
All right, brother. You're the best, man. Appreciate
right back
you.
at you. That's Dan Orlovsky.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.